is Jack Olmstead, GMO Free News. I'm joined today with two special guests, Keri Weber. She's in Flint, Michigan. She's the mother from Flint. Hi, Keri. How's it going today?
Good. Thank you so much.
You got a pretty full dance card today. This is the second of three interviews.
Yes.
What was your first interview like?
The first interview was with MSNBC this morning. It was cold, really cold.
And you were out by the river.
Yes, they didn't tell us. They did not tell me it was going to be outdoors. So I was in a dress, very chilly. But
you had your jacket on. I see it right here. I'm on your Facebook page.
Yep.
Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
So on your Facebook page, and you're out there in your jacket.
In a dress and heels.
And dress and heels. Oh, and they just shot you from the.
Oh yeah. I told them had I known I would have had on the winter boots and jeans, and I mean I froze, but it was very good in that they're bringing attention to the fact this is 100,000 people that have been affected.
So what did you think of the interview?
I thought it went very well. In fact, I was, and it's not a slam to them. I was very surprised at how open it was, really.
Now they only give you like 30 seconds to plead your case, don't they?
It was a little longer than that. I don't know how long it was. I watched it briefly, but the questions were spot on, I thought.
So they wanted to know, I think the first question was, how are you dealing with the water crisis?
Yeah.
So that's a good opening question. If it's good enough for MSNBC, hey, it's good enough for us.
Is the mom not well? We can only do what we can do, and we're trying to mitigate all damage to my husband and our daughter and our dog. As a community entity, I don't know, I guess some people call me community activist now. This is nothing I've ever done, ever. The more active I am, the less helpless I feel. So I am fighting for the rights of 100,000 people, not just my family, every family.
Now I understand that around 5 o'clock you're going to load up your van with water and go deliver it to shut-ins?
Yes. This will be the fourth time we've done this.
And where are the shut-ins?
We have lists of, some organizations have given us lists. Other lists are people we have found on our own or have become aware of. My daughters and I personally alone delivered 150 cases in a 2-day time span. And it was to shut-ins. It was to moms that don't have transportation, that have young children. It just anywhere we could find a need, we took the water there.
That sounds like a full-time job.
It is. I would be much better if I actually worked right now.
So, Leeanne, you kind of laugh at that. How did you meet Keri? How did you guys bond?
We bond over the fact that both of our children have lead poisoning. And when I laugh, I'm not laughing like it's funny. It's laughing because yesterday was the 1-year anniversary for me for starting all the research and the data. And it's just, I mean, yes, that's how it is. I mean, once you start it, it consumes you.
Yes, and it has. And thank you again to Leeanne. I have learned things about water between Leeanne and Mark Edwards and City Hall that I never wanted to know, but because of our situation, we have to know.
I remember our first meeting
I do too.
We were at the town hall meeting in September when we were giving the results from Virginia Tech.
Hmm.
And Keri came up to us, and Keri had me crying my eyes out. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. And I offered to kiss Mark Edwards' feet. That's up, it just, we didn't know when Vicky was diagnosed. We didn't even know there was lead in the water. And we didn't know there was lead in the water when Mike had his eye stroke. And we didn't know there was lead in the water when our dog was diagnosed. And the work that was done between Leeanne and Mark Edwards and Melissa, I found myself in this very uncomfortable situation in Ann Arbor, alone. My husband hadn't gone with us, trying to explain to 5 doctors why a child that had no lead lines in March had them throughout her growth plate in June. And I had no idea where she got it from.
Because at that point we were still being silenced.
Yes.
Is this your daughter here?
That is my eldest daughter, Stephanie. That's not the one. It's my daughter, Victoria.
Okay. How about this picture?
No, go back. The one in the homecoming, the blue dress.
The beautiful one in the homecoming dress.
That's my baby.
Here we are.
That's her.
So tell us the story of your daughter, Victoria.
She had some hip problems last year and was facing open hip surgery. And she had been through x-rays, hundreds of x-rays, 4 MRIs, 3 CAT scans, an MRA. This kid all but glue, she was glowing in the dark. Anyhow, she went down to have a CAT scan, a bone scan done just prior to surgery. And they found lead lines, her growth plate. That was the very first indication we had a problem. And as you can see in that picture, she's quite a bit taller than I am, but she's still growing. And now we found out 2.5, almost 3 weeks ago, I guess, her doctor did a ton of blood work on her to see how she was doing, just to check everything else. And Victoria now has some liver function issues. So
I would have to say that was the second worst phone call that I ever got.
It hit you hard, It hit us hard. I mean, and I felt so bad because Leeanne kept apologizing. In no way was it your fault.
What were you apologizing for, Leeanne?
Because we weren't heard sooner, because people didn't want to listen because we were being silenced. I mean, we knew February, as people, not as the state, we knew in February that I had extremely high lead. And we knew in March that all my kids showed exposure, and one of my children had lead poisoning. And it doesn't feel like it was good enough. That was before everything that Victoria went through.
You're saying that because your sons went through this, you made it your mission, I guess, in life to try to prevent it from happening to other mothers and other children in the community.
Well, I mean, that's why I didn't take the money when I was offered the money to basically go away. I mean, how do you sleep at night knowing that you're doing this to people? And me personally, having the knowledge that this is happening and being called crazy and being told that there's not a problem, how do you just take money and walk away and say, sorry, suckers, not my problem? That's not who I am. I couldn't live with myself.
And no, and Leanne and I are a lot alike. But here's the other thing, Leanne. Because Vicky had extensive hip damage, and this is where things went so south with her. Um, the number one thing they tell you if you have bone or joint damage, and they kept saying it, God, they preached it. She's had it. She had at least 40 doctor's appointments, most in Ann Arbor, over this hip. The number one thing they told us, she has to drink water. She has to drink water. She has to drink more water. So we had a child kicking back 24 to 28 ounce containers times 6 or 8 per day.
Yep.
And this is her consequence.
But see, that's why I was apologizing to Keri, because had the message gotten out there sooner, had people taken it serious, sooner than what they did, if we didn't have to jump through all the hoops and all the resistance and all the fighting, and I mean, I appreciate everything that Mark Edwards has done for the city, for my family personally, but it shouldn't have had to come to that.
Exactly.
And that's what I was apologizing for, because I do take it personally.
Can you take us back a year ago, January the 7th? You said yesterday was your anniversary. What did you do on that first day? When did you decide this is what I'm going to do?
Well, in end of November, beginning in December 2014 was when our water started coming through brown. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. And my son, my 14-year-old at the time, he was really sick. He had been out of school for almost a month. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. They were running all kinds of tests. I mean, we're talking multiple ultrasounds, CAT scan, a colonoscopy, and they couldn't figure it out.
Wow.
And then the water started coming through brown. So at that point, we quit drinking the water. We had contacted the city. And then in January, we had gotten a notice about the TTHMs, that we were in violation for that with the drinking water. So I attended my first city council meeting on that day. And
was that the January 26th city council meeting you're talking about?
Nope, that was the January 7th. And they were feeding us a bunch of fluff. They handed us an excerpt from part of a document from about TTHMs. They were evasive with questions, and we weren't getting any real answers. And I had asked the question about, well, you're talking about, cold water. What happens with hot water? Right. And we were told that doesn't apply to this. So I went home and I started researching to see, what happens with the hot water, and figured out that the vapors for showering, you absorb 4 times more than using it with cold drinking water. So then my thought process was, okay, well then let's make it apply. I started, gathering up more research, and I printed out a health sheet with all, and a resource sheet with all of the websites that I had pinpointed, and I took them into the next city council meeting, and I said, here, I'm making it apply to drinking water. I use this water to put it in, I put it in my pots to boil for spaghetti, and, to make sweet tea, and, it does apply to drinking water. It's not just showering. And at that point I was told we did nothing wrong. We followed the EPA standards for this. We only had to inform you of the cold drinking water part of it, and so that's all we did. We're doing bare minimum, basically. So that was very, very frustrating. The meeting you're talking about is the one where they switched it from the dome. It was supposed to be at City Hall. They switched it to the dome so that nobody had to be sworn in to the statements they were making to the people. And to limit the amount of people that could attend, they were turning people away from that meeting because the dome only holds, I think, 237 people, and City Hall holds a lot more.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's initially where it started. And from there was I started researching and getting reports from the city, raw data reports and operational reports, and comparing and contrasting, and starting to trying to figure out like the chemical makeup and that kind of stuff, because I didn't know any of this stuff then. And it snowballed from there. So the fact that, in February I finally got a doctor's note. The doctor later recanted, but I finally got that doctor's note that said because of Gavin's compromised immune system that he had to drink bottled water. From that point, like when I handed that to the city, and the note about Gavin breaking out so severely with rashes every time he came in contact with it, that's when the city, first started testing, and they were coming in weekly, and every time they came in, the highest they can test for iron is 3.3 in the city, and it was always above that. Always. I mean, every time they tested the water, it was, it was brown, it was high like that. And so we turned, that's when they finally said, okay, well, let's do additional testing. And I showed them, like, at that point too, like, there was sediment coming in my toilet tanks, like in the back of my toilet tanks, where it was, we were having it clog, and we had to keep replacing, I don't know exactly what it's called, but the flap kept like degrading. And so they started testing there, and they found traces of lead with that testing from the stuff they pulled from the toilet tank. So then they're like, okay, let's do the lead and copper test. And we did the first lead and copper test, and that's when I got the frantic phone call. So, I mean, essentially, from citizen standpoint, high lead was discovered in February of 2015. And here we are, January 2016, and we're finally calling a state of emergency. That's my problem. That's where I'm sorry. That's where it feels not good enough. To me. I take it personal because I didn't want anybody else to have to go through what my family was going through. So to know that that wasn't prevented, that's where it hits me on a personal level.
Well, and then the further upset with the FOIA documents that have come out are quote-unquote lead season.
Right.
June of 14. Never heard of lead season. I'm not sure that between like spring and summer or summer and fall, but they knew, meaning the MDEQ knew, children were being poisoned in 2014.
So did the health department.
Exactly. And yet, which takes Gavin out of it. If they had told us Gavin may be okay, Victoria and Mike may be okay, you've got 100,000 people.
But Keri, I mean, you got to think, we can't really say that either, though, because
no,
my kids weren't tested in 2014, and I'm like you. I fill a 32-ounce cup of water, and that thing gets filled, 10 times a day. I personally was drinking 1 gallon of water per day. So, and then my kids, that's all my kids drink. So at that point, it may have just been exposure to my kids because of how high the lead was.
Right.
Not poisoning. But it could have prevented the aftermath of everybody else. Do you understand what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Victoria and Mike might not be in the position they're in if they would have done something in 2014.
Exactly. And they just let it ride. They wrote it off. They lied. They covered. And I'm sorry, it's a lie. This is not a misunderstanding. The smiley faces, why they know kids are being poisoned.
Hey, Keri, how do you feel when they say it was unintentional?
I literally vomited.
I know.
Literally. And when I saw the emails with the smiles,
oh yeah,
very nearly didn't hit the bathroom. I cannot believe they're trying to sell this as an oops and a mistake. It wasn't. To be a mistake means they didn't know it was happening. It is very clear they knew. They ignored it. Without you, Virginia Tech, all of you folks, we would have never known. Never. we'd have been left.
Keri, can you bring down your camera a little bit so we don't have so much headroom?
Okay.
There, a little bit more. You can cut off your hair a little bit. There you go.
I'm really short, so, you know.
Yeah, I know. We want to get your full frame in there. Why don't we? Can we change the subject a little bit?
Yes.
Josh Freeman.
Oh.
I got a right here on the 29th of December. Councilman Josh Freeman resigned from the city council.
Yep.
Do you think you had anything to do with him resigning from the city council?
I hope so. I do. Am I certain? No. There's a lot of questions there's been for years. A lot of the public do not believe that Josh Freeman lives in Flint. We're going to leave it at that. He's already been in Davison. I do think Michael and myself standing up to him and not tolerating what he did to me, I hope it impacted his leaving. I absolutely do. I think losing his seat on the KWA impacted his leaving. I think that's the big piece missing. If he has no tolerance for me ever, we're fair. We're golden.
I just want to point out, to add to what Keri's saying here, repeatedly in multiple different conversations with Freeman about living in Flint and questioning him point blank. He did say he lives in Flint, which we did not believe. But he has said repeatedly his ex-wife, or that he is divorced.
Right.
He has said that so many times. And then in that article that you're showing, Jack, he states, I'm going to go spend time with my wife and my children.
Yes.
So
there's something very wrong about the Freeman story. But what got me, and the reason I did go forward with my quote-unquote public service announcement, no one in a position where they work for us. His whole irritation at me that night, I was not talking to him, had nothing to do with him. I was talking to Miss Henderson and Howard Croft, and asking them at what point was the MDEQ going to correct their testing. I was asking them questions because of Mike and Victoria and Jasmine, our dog. And all of a sudden, at the end of the table, he starts exploding. Oh my God, it's 8 o'clock. I have better things to do. I was not rude to him, didn't say anything I wanted to. All I said is, I'm very sorry. Is the issues with my family tying up your evening? I gathered my stuff to leave the building. I was done. And that's when he came at me in the hallway. And in this video, at the end of this, after I spoke against him that night, he said, well, you can FOIA the document. There's 10 feet of that wall the camera doesn't cover. It's exactly where we were.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
Absolutely. And Monica Galloway admitted from the city council seat she saw him come at me. I had another witness that came out and saw him right in my face using language that was unbelievable, telling me I didn't know anything about him. Who was I to judge him? That was wrong. I'm asking questions trying to save my family. I don't care what his timetable was. And I wasn't speaking to him. Had nothing to do with him.
If it's happening to his family, it would matter. But because it's happening to your family, he doesn't care.
Exactly.
He
Exactly.
he moved his family out of Flint before they switched the water. He had a heads up.
Yep. A lot of them had heads up. We didn't.
Exactly, and that's a problem.
Well, and I know, just like me, Leanne, you can't afford a $5,000 to $7,000 system. I can't either. I can't put reverse osmosis in my home. It's money I don't have.
But see, that's I have a problem with that. It's not that even if I had the money, which I don't, we shouldn't have to for a
No,
service that is being provided that we're paying high rates for.
and I agree with you, but I know there are certain members that knew beforehand, and certain elements of government, it has been confirmed, that they had their systems put into place prior to the switch.
Right.
We drank this water till June of this year when my dad came home because we can't afford to buy the bottled water. When we were forced to look at the cost the other day, because I had never thought of it, we're spending somewhere between our water bill, which fluctuates 120 to 240, and what we're having to purchase. This one family, we're spending between like $350 to $500 a month in water.
Hmm.
That is just shy of a quarter of our income.
I can tell you, I don't know how you guys are buying your water, but we had to with our family because we could not financially afford to keep buying the individual bottles. It was not in the budget. We went and bought 40 gallons and then refilled them because we couldn't afford to do it any other way. And 10 of those gallons had to be kept aside every week to bathe my children because I refused to allow Gavin and Garrett, with them being so little, to be put
Absolutely.
in that water. I mean, the rest of us, we couldn't afford for the rest of us not to bathe in it. We
No,
had my husband bathed at work. My daughter, she would go shower from time to time at friends' houses. But, me, my older son, like we were kind of stuck. We didn't have a choice. It was a baby wipe bath twice a week, which that's another additional cost, and then a shower once a week. Lots of baby powder for the hair. I mean, I'm
and
not trying to sound crappy, but that's what it was.
that's what we're still doing. We still are. We've got bath wipes we use.
You want to
We're
hear something crazy?
what?
We're here in Virginia. My kids are here in Virginia. They're out of the water, and I still can't bring myself to bathe them normally.
That's not crazy.
They
That's
still get baby white baths and bathe once a week, and we still drink bottled water because we can't bring ourselves not to.
I don't blame you. We've got Victoria who in Ann Arbor, and she was very thirsty. And there's water fountains everywhere, and this was just Tuesday. And I told her, honey, go ahead and get a drink. She looked at me like, no. And I
Like
said,
beds.
yeah. And I said, sweetheart, we're in Ann Arbor. We're 70 miles from Flint. I explained it all. She looked at me and said, never again.
Exactly.
Never.
Gavin
So
and Garrett, they're 4. And if anybody hands them something to drink, Mommy, is this good water? Is this bad water? Mommy, is this okay? Can we drink this? They're 4 years old.
yeah, there's a lot of that. Mike's terrified of the shower. He's half blind. I'd come out of the shower. We set our alarms for 5 minutes per shower. I don't even know if I want to admit this. No more than twice a week in our home. And you're talking 3 women. So there you go. And 2 of them, 15 and 20. It's a terrible age to do this. But I was in the shower one day for 12 minutes. I had a panic attack so bad, I thought I was going to wind up in the hospital. And that's from taking a shower. Vicky's had panic attacks. Mike has been so full of fear. He is terrified because he's lost half of the vision in his right eye. He doesn't have a lot left to give. He would like to have some eyesight. And his blood pressure yesterday, his heart rate's fine as usual. His blood pressure was 178 over 120.
And he's on what? Like he's on like 8 pills a day or something?
8 pills a day, 3 types of medication. And is it better than the 240 over 140? Is it better than the 290 over 160? Yeah, it is better. Is it good? No way. But they can't control his blood pressure, which once he was tested for lead, we went, oh, because that is a sign in adults. The cardiologist, they've done echocardiograms, he's been through EKGs, he's done a stress test. There's nothing wrong with his heart. There is no other reason for his blood pressure to have done this. So, go ahead.
I was wondering if you could talk about the forgotten members of the community, those that aren't below the ages of 6.
It's all of us. I have had people say, well, unless you're under the age of 6 or over 70, you're fine. And we had a very hard time initially when Mike was injured. I'm sorry, not injured, poisoned. And when Victoria was poisoned, because she's 16, he was 44 when he lost his vision. And a lot of people are like, well, they shouldn't have trouble. The problem is lead doesn't stop and check how old you are. It doesn't care how much money you have. So what we're truly dealing with, in my opinion, in Flint, is 100,000 residents of all ages, even healthy people, that have not only been exposed, but we don't know how many are affected. This is citywide. And initially, I couldn't get anyone, even at City Hall, to consider Mike or Victoria, certainly not the press, because I was told they're too old. We're only looking for little kids. It could be something else. It doesn't really matter. It's an ISO. And I was actually told it doesn't matter about my 40.
What did I tell you when you called me with that?
You said everybody matters. And you told me we will get this out there. You promised me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's out. And listen, the infants on a very personal level, I take very hard. Very hard. I don't think attention should be taken from the kids at all. I'm not trying to divert attention from the kids or the elderly or those with immune issues. I couldn't do that and live with myself.
Right.
All I'm trying to say is, folks, pay attention.
It's bigger. It's bigger than the scope they're giving.
It's huge. It is huge. I mean, Victoria's 16, almost 16. We don't know. We know Steph and I still have blood lead levels, or did, when 90 days after we quit drinking the water. I assume this isn't good for us either. But right now, the focus has been the two that are so damaged. That's what I have to do right now. I have to keep Mike up. We've got, we had 1 week. We had 9 appointments in 4 days between him and Victoria. One specialist after another. He's seeing a cardiologist. He's seeing 2 types of eye doctors. And they flat told us his vision will never come back. It is gone. And it's because he had an eye stroke. His blood pressure got so high, it blew the two main arteries in his eye. It doesn't come back. It's gone. So my focus in this whole thing, and I admit, and I have no trouble admitting it, I am so late to the game, it's sad. I was not there in the beginning with Leeanne and Melissa. But we had the hip thing going on with Vic. We were waiting for open hip surgery on a 15-year-old, which thank God didn't have to happen. But we were so tied up with that, and that's from an auto accident, that had to be taken care of. The minute I was free from them, seriously, I was right there with them. And I've done everything I can to stay in them. But no, I'm not one of the original, and I admit that freely. I'm
You don't
late
have to be one of the originals to be affected and to be fighting.
We all have to fight.
That's what I'm saying. You don't apologize for, life. Life happens.
I know.
And look at what's happened so far.
Yeah. And that's the hard part. It's just the hard part. Telling Vic, we don't know. Are you going to have kids? How bad is your liver? And that's the other thing. Vic and I are the wrong blood type. As her mom, I would give that child every organ I have. I can't even do that. There's no way. So the sense of helplessness is off the charts. So like Leeanne, I speak out, I fight, I protest. Because at least then I'm doing something.